Thank you all for attending today's Maximizing Herbs cooking demo. So this is actually the last of our Maximizing Herbs demos. We have some new demos coming up for May and June. If you have not already signed up, definitely sign up for those. I will be doing Bring It to the Barbecue, which are some fun recipes that you could bring along to a cookout in the summer. And Michelle, my colleague, will be doing Pastabilities. So she will be talking all about pasta. She's got 3 really fun pasta recipes that are just very different and so delicious. They all look so good. So definitely sign up for those as well. It looks like Erin put the links in the chat for you if you'd like to sign up for those. So for Maximizing Herbs, today we have 4 really great recipes that we're going to be cooking. One that kind of goes together into one beautiful dish. But I wanted to start by talking to you about food for thought. So for those of you who have not been on a cooking demonstration before, Food for Thought is brought to you by our sponsor, Eli Lilly, where we talk about the nutrition power of one of the ingredients we'll be using while we're cooking. And so today I thought it was only fair to use an herb for my Food for Thought moment. So we'll be talking about basil. So here I have basil, this beautiful fresh basil. I love to use basil in the summertime because I feel like it adds such a beautiful flavor. You know, I always think about caprese salad. It's so delicious. There are actually 40 different culinary varietals of basil that can be used. Overall, grown throughout the world, it's expected that there's about 50 to 150 different varietals used for all different types of purposes. So basil can be white, it can be green, it can be purple. You've maybe seen like purple Thai basil at the grocery store before. All of them are going to contain a ton of nutrition. And the great thing about basil, many of our herbs and all of our fruits and veggies is that usually you can use almost all of the plant. So there's nutrition in the leaves, in the stems, in the buds, in the flowers of basil. You're going to get that nutrition power no matter what part of it you use. So speaking on the nutrition, it's going to have antioxidant properties. It has phenolic compounds that help prevent against oxidative stress in our body. So it's going to promote our cell health. So very important, keeping our cells functioning. It's also going to be anti-inflammatory in nature. So the anti-inflammatory nature of it is that it prevents or inhibits the release of cytokines, which can produce or be pro-inflammatory in nature. So we want to try to reduce inflammation through our diets, and basil is one of the ways we can do so. Again, whichever you choose to consume. It also in research has been shown to be antimicrobial and antibacterial, specifically preventing against E. coli bacteria. So I know that we all are mindful of staying away from anything that may give us a foodborne illness or bacteria. So basil, the oils in it are going to support with that. It's also been shown to help with liver health and help with our blood sugar health. So there are so many different nutritional properties to basil. So definitely give it a go for your next recipe. I think it's so fun to be able to try different options as well. So trying holy basil, sweet basil, lemon basil, Thai basil, whatever you can find at your grocery store, definitely give it a try next time you're there. So I'm actually going to save this for a little recipe that we have later. But first, I'm going to go ahead and flip my screen just so that you don't have to watch me in this up and down view for the whole time. While I flip my screen, I'm actually going to throw it to my lovely co-host, Erin. Many of you probably know Erin or have talked to Erin previously, but Erin, I would love for you to just talk a little bit about you and a special event we have coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I am so excited to be co-hosting this morning. And we Unite for Her has one of our main fundraisers happening tomorrow. So we have our Bloom Fashion Show, which is one of our 4 key fundraisers that take place throughout the year. So for those that are local, it's taking place in Drexel Hill at the Drexel Brook. And it is a fashion show with our members being our models with different looks. It's a wonderful early afternoon spring event and fundraiser. And one of the things that we have is a wonderful silent auction. And I wanted to just share, so for those that may not be in the area or may not be able to attend or just want to share, you are welcome to make a donation, bid on some of the items that we have. We've got trips, we've got dinners, We've got CSA offerings. We've got some big options that are available to anyone across the country that you are welcome to bid on. So I will put the link in the chat. You can check out, you can see who our models are, our grand prize raffles. We've got a stay in Barbados at a resort and spa. We've got a shopping spree, which I will be bidding on. We've got a stay in Antigua. So there's just a lot of great things, or you can just donate to fund one of our members. So lots of fun stuff. We are all really excited. Our entire staff will be there tomorrow. Even Catherine from our team is flying in from Florida today to be with us. So we're really excited. So be sure to check that out. So I just dropped that link in the chat for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And hopefully maybe I'll see some of you there tomorrow, or I'll see your names pop up on some of the items. Hopefully somebody on here can win one of these raffles or these grand prizes. That would be great. We're very, very excited about it. And so I'm excited to, prep some food in advance, because I know I'll be busy running around tomorrow, and this will make a great dinner for me tomorrow evening when I get back. So first, before I get started with everything, I need to prep two things for recipes that we're making. One I need to prep is, although I'm just realizing I didn't preheat my oven, so it might take a little bit longer than usual. The first thing I need to prep are crispy, crunchy, roasted chickpeas. So this recipe is inside of the salad recipe, but I'm just gonna kind of go over it with you now, because we'll come back to the salad later. So chickpeas are a really delicious, high protein, high fiber snack, and just food that you can incorporate into your diet whenever. I like to enjoy them in a crispy style because I feel like it helps to satisfy that crispy, crunchy, salty snack cravings that sometimes I have. So what I'm going to do is I have a can of chickpeas. I'm going to take it. I have my sink here. I'm just straining them in a colander. I'm going to go ahead and give them a rinse. All right. And I'm just trying to get some of the water off of it. You can also wrap them in a paper towel, get some of the moisture out. But if there's still moisture, that's completely fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the chickpeas. I'm going to pour them onto this baking sheet that I have already ready. And I'm going to drizzle some olive oil on top. You could use whatever oil is your preference. I just keep olive oil on hand. The measurement for the olive oil, pretty loose. I would say maybe a tablespoon or so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle it with some seasonings. So this is very flexible. You can do whatever you would like with it. I'm going to put a little bit of salt on it, but I'm also going to I have this very fun seasoning blend I got from Trader Joe's. I love to get the Trader Joe's seasoning blends. This is a Georgian seasoning blend. So it has crushed chili peppers, coriander, fenugreek, diced minced garlic, salt, and marigold. So I'm going to toss my chickpeas with that as well. I'm going to be fairly liberal with it because I want them to have a ton of flavor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give them a loose toss with my hands so that I'm making sure everything gets coated. Of course, you could also toss it with some tongs or a spatula. All right. Perfect. And what I want to do is spread them out so that none of them are stacked on top of each other, because we want to make sure that they're all going to be cooked fairly evenly. I'm just going to rinse off my hands. And I'm going to go ahead and put them in the oven. So I have the oven at 400. It is going to need to preheat a little bit, but I'm just going to go ahead and put them in the oven. That's an energy saving tip, an unintentional tip for the day. An energy saving tip is to put things into the oven while it's still preheating, because it's still getting warm and you're still able to use that heat versus waiting for it to preheat. There's a little bit of energy lost there in waiting. So I'm going to pop these in. I generally cook them for about 25 or 30 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer for 30. We'll give it a check in 30 since the oven is still preheating, and we'll see how they look. All right. So I'll go ahead, start that timer. Other thing that I need to prepare for something we're going to do later is I'm going to prepare a syrup that we're going to use in our mocktail. So the mocktail is the last recipe that we'll be making today. But we need to make a syrup because I want it to cool down a little bit before we pour it into our beverage. So let me go ahead and grab my ingredients. So here I have a half a cup of water. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the microwave because I want it to be hot. So I'm going to set it for 1 minute, just let it get nice and hot. The recipe says boiling, use your discretion. I'm going to, in this bowl here that I have, I'm going to put in some mint and some basil. So those are the herbs that we're using for our delicious syrup for our mocktail. But I will also say, you can certainly be flexible with it. If you're thinking, I don't know how much I really like mint, put something else in it. Make it all basil or make it all mint, whatever your preference is. You're still going to get all the benefits of that nutrition from whatever herb you choose because the oils are going to be extracted from these herbs. So I'm just pulling off the leaves of my mint. Now I'm doing my basil. You need about a quarter cup of each. I like to always put in a little bit more because I feel like it just helps extract a little bit extra flavor. And I like to rip them so that the leaves are ripped in half. And that way the oils have the ability to kind of extract from those. So I'll just go in here, I'll give them a little last rip, and you can see I just have my bowl of my mint and my basil. Now what I'm going to do to make a syrup is generally sugar and water mixed together to make it more liquefied versus pouring sugar into a beverage or what have you. I'm going to use honey for my syrup today. So I have some wild and raw honey. I need a quarter cup, so I'm going to measure it out here, and I'm going to pour it on top of my mint and basil. One tip that I like to use for really sticky ingredients like honey, I'm not using it for this specific purpose, but when you're baking is a good time to use it. If you have to use something sticky, honey, maple syrup, peanut butter, and you have to measure it out, spray your measuring cup with a little bit of cooking spray in advance. And that helps it so that the sticky item comes right out. It doesn't get all stuck to the inside like it usually does. All right, so I've got my quarter cup here of my honey. I'll move this off to the side, and then let me go ahead and grab my water. And I'm just gonna pour my water on top of the mint and basil syrup.
Joyce had a really great idea that I have seen on social media about taking the leaves off of herbs, where you put the stem through a hole of the cheese grater and pull it through and all the herbs. I've never tried it, but I've always been tempted. Joyce, you might be encouraging.
Yes, I have seen that too, but never tried it. But it seems like it would make it so easy, especially for ones. I feel like sometimes, like I'm going to use thyme later. That can be a pain to pull all the little leaves off. So yeah, definitely a great idea. All right, so I gave this a mix. So there's just the water, the honey, the mint, and the basil in here. So I'm just going to let it sit until we're ready to use it towards the end of the demo. That'll help all of this wilt down, get the flavor extracted into it as well. So I'm going to put it over here with my mocktail ingredients. All right, so those are the two things we needed to set up in advance. Now we're really going to get into the bulk of the recipes. So funnily enough, those two were actually for the two recipes we're doing later on. We're going to start with our herb polenta and our chimichurri shrimp recipes. So that's kind of like a fun play on shrimp and grits. Polenta and grits is a fairly interchangeable word. And for those of you who haven't cooked or used grits before, they're a corn-based product. So I'll show you what they look like. But first, to get started, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the polenta because that does take a little bit longer. So I'm going to heat up. I have 3 cups of broth in my saucepan over here. I'm just going to heat it on high because I want it to be warm and boiling before I get to use it. So while I do that, I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to be putting in the recipe. So we're going to be making that polenta. Like I said, it's the corn grit, but we're also going to make shrimp and chimichurri. So chimichurri is an oil-based sauce that's got some herbs in it and some spices as well. It's so, so delicious. So let's actually, while that's heating up, get started with the chimichurri. So I have here, this is just a blender cup. I have a Ninja blender. Somebody asked me on the last one. I really do enjoy it. And it really does help to have the little cups and the big cups as well. So I like to use that. Let me turn my fan on now also while the oven is heating up. So in my blender cup, what I'm going to do is I am going to I need about a 1/4 cup of onion. So here I have about half of a small onion, and I'm going to need 2 cloves of garlic. So the beauty of this is that this doesn't have to be very meticulously cut. So I just cut the top off of my onion. I'm gonna peel the skin off. And I'm just going to slice it into a couple of chunks, just so that my blender has an easier time. If you have a high-powered blender, it's fairly easy for the blender to be able to break up these ingredients. All right, so I popped the onion into my blender cup. Now what I'm gonna do is I need 2 cloves of garlic. So I have them here. I wanted to show you what I like to do to take them out of the skin. That's a pretty quick and easy method. I cut the end off of the garlic and I'll peel it off. And then I take my knife with the sharp side facing away from me, and I push down on top of the garlic. It helps to crush up the garlic, but it also makes it very easy to just peel the skin right off of it. So I'll put in my 1 clove of garlic, and then I'll go ahead and put in my 2nd clove of garlic. So we'll crush and we'll take off the skin. Perfect. And I'll pop that in my blender cup. So again, I just have onion and garlic in here. I'm going to take it, put the blender end on, if it wants to get on. There we go. And then I'm going to just pulse it a couple times in the blender. I just want it to be a little bit chopped up. All right, perfect. You can use a food processor as well, or with this recipe, if you don't have a blender or food processor, you can just chop everything up really finely and mix it all together, and that works just the same. All right, so I have my little bit of my onion and garlic there. It gets a lot smaller when you pulse it and blend it together. All right, and now I have parsley and cilantro. I know they look very similar, but definitely different tastes. We're going to take the tops of this parsley. So the recipe calls for just about 1 bushel or about 1 cup. So I'm just going to take the tops off. Stems are okay. If there's little stems in there, you don't need to worry about that. And I'm going to put it in my blender. All right. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just give this a little pulse just to give my blender some space. So I'll pulse up the greens a little bit. All right. And then I like to shake it down to the bottom, and I'll put in my cilantro. And then I think, we'll have to look, that my broth might be boiling. So we might take a pause and check on that. All right, so I've got my cilantro in there now too. Still have the onion and garlic at the bottom. You just want to chop up the herbs a little bit. So we're not trying to liquefy them or anything like that. So just a couple little pulses is good. All right, so here you can see they're kind of nicely chopped up a little bit. Some are a little bit more mashed, some are bigger. Totally fine to have that differentiation in size. But let's take a quick moment and let's look at our broth on the stove and see if it's boiling. It looks like it is. So I'll go ahead and I'll take this lid off. So we're going to head to the herb polenta recipe. So with the polenta, and how I like to cook the polenta and grits is you bring the water or the broth, or you can even use milk, to a boil and then pour in the polenta very slowly. So that is the key that I learned. So I have 3 cups of broth and I have 1 cup of polenta. What I'm going to do is I'll turn the heat down a little bit, and I'm just going to pour it in slowly and whisk, and pour a little bit in and whisk, because I don't want it to get clumpy. If it does get clumpy, that's okay. You can always break apart the clumps. But what I have found is that this pour slow method of pouring it in helps to make sure that it doesn't get really big lumps and bumps inside of it. All right, so I'm just giving it a mix. Mixing. Sometimes I'll take a little pause, just make sure I don't have any lumps in it yet. I'll keep on pouring. Go ahead.
Can you use any polenta mix, Aubrey?
Yeah. So I have the Bob's Red Mill polenta. That's what I'm using. I would say just making sure it's, 100% the corn grits or polenta. Sometimes they sell them in mixes with like flavorings and packets like that. So for this recipe, just using the polenta itself. But yeah, any brand should work completely fine. Okay. Good question. All right, so I've got all that poured in. And what I'm gonna do, or what the key is that I have found, is just to keep whisking. So we want it to cook for about 5 minutes. I'm gonna say about because sometimes the broth gets absorbed very quickly. Sometimes the broth takes a little bit longer to become absorbed. But what you want is you want your grits to soak up that broth and thicken so that they are delicious and plump. So I'm mixing it and I'm slowly watching it get a little bit thicker. And I'm just gonna keep mixing it, or then we get some lumps if we stop mixing, which again, totally fine. But I like to try to make sure as much as I can that it's not too lumpy or bumpy. If your polenta is popping, so mine is popping a little bit, just turn the volume, turn the heat down a little bit on that polenta. All right, so I'm giving it still a good mix, letting it absorb up all of that moisture. And I'm gonna mix it for about another minute. Again, I would say anywhere from 2 or 3 minutes to 5 minutes, you're gonna mix this and let it absorb up that moisture. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take it actually off of the heat and cover it. So it's still going to continue to soak up some of that moisture. It's just gonna be a little bit of a slower process versus the expedited process of doing it over the heat. All right, so I will go ahead, I will show you what it looks like. So here is the polenta. I know it's a little steamy, so you probably can't see it that well, but here's the polenta. It's still fairly thin. You can move it around, it's pretty viscous, but I'm gonna go ahead and take it off now, and I'm going to cover it and leave it for about 5 minutes. We're gonna start working on something else, so it might end up being a little bit more than 5 minutes, but just covering it and putting it to the side on something that doesn't have heat going on it. So I have this over here, I'll leave it there to cool down and to absorb. And then I'm actually gonna start heating up another pan that I'm gonna use for our shrimp. So with the shrimp, we want our pan to be on about medium heat or so. Let me get the shrimp from the fridge. So
Aubrey, while you're sorry to interject, we just a question going back to the polenta about gluten-free. So polenta is gluten-free, or that would be a good option for someone that was looking for an alternative.
Yes, yep, because it's made of corn. So yeah, that is a great observation and a great point. It would be a good gluten-free alternative. And even this recipe, even if you wanted to make it with a different type of starch or grain, you could use something like a farro or a buckwheat or a brown rice. I feel like the options are very open for how you could interpret the recipe and how you could enjoy it. Great question. All right, so I have some shrimp here. I'm just straining it out. I want to touch on, I'm all about food safety. So I wanted to touch on shrimp and food safety. So when we're thinking about any animal or fish-based protein, we want to make sure that we are defrosting it in the correct way. So I'm just giving these a little rinse. There's still a little bit of ice on them from when they were defrosting. All right, perfect. And so with the shrimp, I put them in the fridge and I allowed them to defrost in the fridge. A lot of times we may put things on the countertop to defrost them, but that can make it fall in something called the temperature danger zone, which is 40 to 140 degrees, where bacteria can multiply rapidly. If you're putting it from the freezer to the fridge, it's not going to reach that temperature danger zone. And so that bacteria is not going to be able to grow. So that's why I always say defrost whatever you can in the fridge. If you need to quickly defrost something, you can fill up your sink or fill up a bowl with cold water, put the frozen item in, and keep changing out the water every 15 or 30 minutes. Again, we're trying to keep it cold, but not warm, but defrosting it. So changing out that water so that it's new, fresh water. The water's not getting too warm, but it's kind of chipping away at the frozen bit. So that's what I did with my shrimp. I put it in the fridge and I also put it in water just to make sure that it was getting completely thawed out. But shrimp doesn't take very long to thaw out as it is. All right, so our pan is pretty warm. So I'm gonna pour in a little bit of olive oil. And then I'm going to add in my shrimp. I have jumbo shrimp here. You could really use any kind of shrimp that you want, or you could use a different protein. You could use tofu, you could use chicken, you could use beans, you could use really anything that sounds good to you. I just chose shrimp as the protein because I do enjoy fish and seafood. And I think it's a good way to get in some additional nutrients, especially because I know a lot of us want to eat more fish or seafood, but maybe don't always know how. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to toss up the shrimp. I also made sure to just thoroughly wash my hands because I was touching the raw shrimp. So I washed it with soap and water. I'm going to toss around the shrimp until it turns pink. So the shrimp is gray right now. Raw shrimp is gray. As it cooks, it becomes pink and becomes more opaque. So you can't see through it. It's gray and somewhat translucent when it's raw. One thing that I learned throughout these cooking demos and looking up the best way to cook shrimp is you want it to make a C shape, but not an O shape. When the shrimp curls all the way around into an O, that means that it's overcooked. When it's in more of a C shape, that means that it's just cooked right. So I know I have certainly made overcooked shrimp many a time, very guilty of it. And this is a good way to just kind of notice, is my shrimp ready? Because I know once it turns pink, it's hard to know, is it done or is it ready? So that's a good practice just to keep, in your toolkit. So the shrimp will take a few minutes to cook. Some of them are already getting a little bit pinker. We'll keep tossing it throughout every once in a while, but I'll circle back now to our chimichurri because we had stopped making that to start with the polenta. So I have my cup here, onion, garlic, cilantro, parsley. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in a half a cup of olive oil. So I have it already pre-measured for myself. All right, I'm gonna put in a little bit of salt, a little bit of, this is optional, paprika. It adds a little smoky flavor. And then I'm going to need a 1/4 cup of lime juice. So I'm gonna take my lime, I'm gonna roll it on the counter. That helps to release some of the juices from it. I have 2 limes here. I think I might need both. So I'll roll them both. And I'm going to slice it in half. And then one of my fun kitchen tools that I love is just a little citrus juicer. So all you have to do is take the citrus and you twist it on the top of the juicer here. What I love about this is the ease, and it also has a measurement on the side. So I don't have to pour it out and measure and know, okay, is this a 1/4 cup? Is it 2 tablespoons? It has all those measurements you would need. So I'll show you. It's got all these measurements here on the side. It's got 1/8 cup, 1/4 cup. It also measures it in tablespoons. So great Target gadget if you're looking for anything to upgrade your kitchen. All right, so this is 1 lime. I need 1/4 of a cup. Let's see how much this is. It's between 1/8 cup and 1/4 cup. So I'm going to cut this lime in half. And I'm just gonna juice half of it. I think that'll probably be enough.
Could you use lemon if we have because this is like a wildly fresh sauce, which is great. So
yeah.
if limes were the only thing that you were missing. You could use any kind of citrus, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever citrus you have on hand. I like the lime because I feel like it is so bright with the cilantro, but I think lemon would have just the same impact. So yeah, whatever citrus you've got on hand, definitely.
Yeah. And Joyce loves the juicer, as do I. I think we're all maybe searching Amazon right now for that link for that, because I love the measuring aspect of that.
Yeah, it just makes it convenient. I've had juices before where I've had to like pour it out and you need 2 tablespoons. So you're scooping the tablespoon out of the cup. And this just makes it so much easier. So much easier. All right, let me check on the shrimp. Looks pretty good. Gonna keep cooking it. There's still some pieces that are a little bit gray. So just tossing it around.
And Susan mentioned she did use lemon and it still is yummy, the sauces. So yeah.
Oh, good.
It can be super versatile. Yeah, love that.
Yeah. I feel like especially in the summer, I always have 1 extra lemon or 1 extra lime. You always have something left over from a recipe. So great to just utilize whatever, even if it was like an orange, whatever you have just on hand, just pop that in. Absolutely. All right, now I'm going to give this a pulse. I don't want it to liquefy completely. If it does, that's fine, but I just want to mix it together loosely. So I'm going to give it a couple pulses. I did 1, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake it up to make sure I'm getting that onion and garlic to the bottom. All right, 1 last. Perfect. All right. So this here, you can see it's still a bit oily, but it's got the nice chopped up bits of our herbs in there, got the chopped up bits of onion. So I'll put this to the side for now. We're gonna need that for our shrimp, which is almost done cooking. And then let's make sure we finish off that polenta. So we're making that just as delicious, just as beautifully herbaceous. So I'll get my little tray over here. I've got a lot of different herbs going into the polenta. So I have some fresh oregano. I have some thyme. I have chives. And I have parsley. So it's a very herbaceous and delicious. It's actually considered a winter herb polenta. But what I think about it is it's one of those catch-all recipes, as all of these are. You can really just toss whatever you have in your fridge into the recipe. I know that I am very guilty of needing 1 tablespoon of parsley for a recipe, and I buy an entire bushel of parsley, and then I don't know what to do with the rest. So then I'm left with this extra parsley. This is a great way to utilize all of these recipes, to utilize all those extra herbs. So I'm just slicing up the chives. I did the parsley. Just want them fairly small. I don't mind like a larger bite. I'm gonna take my thyme and I'm just gonna peel it off of the stem. Sometimes if it's got a nice thick stem, it's fairly easy to just pull it right off the stem. Sometimes if the stems are a little bit thinner, the stems might break on you. So just kind of, trying your best to get that off. All right, so I've got all my parsley, or my thyme, I'm sorry. And I'm going to keep these. I might be able to make some sort of broth with the stems of all of these herbs afterwards. So I always try not to throw anything away until I know if I need it for something else or could use it for something else. All right, and just chopping up my oregano. Beautiful. And I'm just gonna do one last little chop over all of them. Try to get them a little smaller. All right, perfect. And our shrimp is looking beautiful, if I do say so myself. It is in the shape of a C, okay, some of them are in the shape of an O, I'll be honest, but many of them are in the shape of a C. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off the heat for now. All right, I'm gonna recheck in with my polenta. So I'll take this lid off and show you how it has thickened up a little bit. So let me grab a spoon. So if you remember before, it was very viscous and very liquidy. Now it's much thicker because it has absorbed all of that liquid sitting with the lid on and the heat. So I'm gonna take this polenta I'm going to add in, this is a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. With the Parmesan cheese, it is a little bit more of an indulgent recipe, but you can also use nutritional yeast if you wanted a vegan alternative, or if you wanted something that was going to provide a little protein boost. If you use nutritional yeast, I would say maybe a quarter cup, but of course, do it to taste. Or you may say, I want to do Parmesan cheese, but half a cup is not enough. I need a little bit more. That's okay too. Do it to taste, definitely enjoy the recipe. All right, and so I mixed that in, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put my fresh herbs in as well. So I'll take my cutting board and I'll plop in all of these. Go ahead.
Aubrey, while you're adding those, we had a question just about other tips for how to preserve or freeze some of the herbs, because yes, sometimes they're expensive and we don't necessarily want to throw them away. Any ideas for how we could preserve some of those herbs to make them last a little longer?
Yes, good question. The one thing I would say for keeping it in the fridge, the best tactic that I have learned to help them last longer in the fridge is to cut off the stems and then to place them in a little bit of water, like a small mason jar or similar, to place all the stems in, almost like you would cut flowers. Then that helps to keep them hydrated so they're not wilting and dying. Now you can freeze herbs as well. I would make sure they're washed and thoroughly dried before you put them in the freezer, and push out all the air, put them in a plastic bag and push that out. They usually become a little bit more brittle, but they can still really liven up once they're heated up. And this actually was not my idea. It was somebody else on a previous cooking class had mentioned the idea of, in an ice cube tray, filling it with oil, like an olive oil or what have you, and mixing the oil with some of your extra fresh herbs, so that when you go to cook a recipe in the winter, when maybe less fresh herbs are abundant, you can just take out your cube of olive oil, put it in the pan, and you're going to have some beautiful fresh herbs preserved in that olive oil. So those would be my tips as far as preserving those herbs and using them a little bit later on. But I think there are so many different ways that we can save them and utilize them later, even if it's just hanging them to dry and turning them into dried herbs. That's definitely another tactic as well. All right, so I poured in about half of the chimichurri sauce into my shrimp. So I'm just giving it a good little mix here. I'll show you what it looks like in a second. So here's our chimichurri shrimp. I'm mixing it around just to kind of get them all coated. I used half of the sauce, but you could always use more. You could use less. The sauce will save for, I would say, about 5 to 7 days, because it is an oil-based sauce, but it does have the fresh herbs in it. So those might start to lose some quality to them after about 5 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bowl. We're going to get ready to plate. I'm going to take some of my delicious polenta, and I'll show you what that looks like before I put the shrimp on. So now this is what it looks like with all of the herbs in it. You've got some nice bright green speckles, which is very fun. And then I'll take a couple pieces of shrimp, plate it all nice. Sometimes when I have a little extra of the warmed chimichurri sauce, I'll pour that on top as well. All right, and there is our herb polenta with chimichurri shrimp. It smells so good as I'm holding it here right now. But this is a great heartwarming recipe. You can make each component separately. You could even just make the chimichurri sauce and use it for a completely different reason. I love these recipes because I feel like they are so versatile and you can use the different components of them. So definitely something to try, especially for us on the East Coast. I know by me it is a rainy day, so something to try on a rainy day for sure.
Aubrey, Susan said, go ahead and eat it. She won't feel bad. We won't feel bad if you want to dive right in. I would agree.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go. I'm just going to go eat it now. It looks so good. I'm excited to dive in. This will be my lunch afterwards. So that is the absolute positive. All right, so now moving on, I'll just leave that to the side for now. I'll package it up and put it away afterwards. The shrimp would only last for a couple of days. I usually try to be more mindful of fish, only keeping it cooked in the fridge for just a couple of days, 2 or so at a time. So it's something that you could dive into today, tomorrow. If you're not going to be able to use it right away, I always say pop it in the freezer. You know, if you know that you're not going to be able to eat all of it, save some of it in the freezer, and then you can have it on another day when you're maybe more able to. All right, so we're going to actually head into the next recipe now, which is our Green Goddess Crunch salad. So I'm just washing off my blender blade because I'm actually using another blender cup in just a second. And let me just tidy up the area, get some of these things I don't need out of the way. All right, so my timer went off for my chickpeas. Let's check on them and see how they look. They actually look pretty well cooked. See, so the benefit of putting them in while the oven is preheating still gets them nice and delicious and cooked. So I'll take these out and show you. There's a little bit of burnt spice in the middle, but these are our crispy roasted chickpeas. So what I'll do is I'll let them cool down. We're going to use them for this recipe. If you take them out of the oven and they seem still soft and mushy, like the chickpeas that come out of the can, just put them back into the oven for a little bit longer. You know, I don't want you to feel like you have to take them out just because the recipe said 30 minutes. If you want them a little bit crispier or a little bit softer, just modify the recipe as it feels right to you. All right, so let me grab everything I need for my salad. All right, so I have my big bowl. I really love these bowls that are not really bowls, they're plates. I'm just a big fan of them. So I'm going to be making my salad in this bowl plate. And I'm also going to be making the Green Goddess dressing recipe. So this recipe or this salad is mostly going to be about the Green Goddess salad dressing. I want you to know that for the salad itself, I just want you to be flexible with it. So if you're looking at this and thinking, I don't like cucumber, then don't put cucumber in it. Put something different in it or put your favorite vegetables in it. I don't want you to feel like you have to make it exactly this way. So I'm just taking everything out for now. I'm going to start with spinach. I like to use baby spinach in my salads, mostly because, and you can probably relate to this, sometimes I don't get to all of my baby spinach throughout the week, and it's the end of the week and there's maybe a little bit that is on its way out. With the baby spinach, I'll put it in the freezer so that I can use it later in a smoothie. Whereas some of the more bitter greens or tougher greens like kale or things like spring mix, I just personally don't always enjoy those as much in a smoothie as much as I do spinach. So that's why I like to get spinach so that it can be multi-purpose if needed. So I have my nice little spinach base here. I'm going to put this off to the side. I'm going to make my salad. So I've got these cherry tomatoes. I'm actually not even going to slice them up. I'm just going to keep them whole and put them in my salad. I've got a nice orange pepper. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slice it into long strips. And then I'm going to dice it in the opposite direction. I personally, and I know everybody has their own preferences, I like my salad to have smaller bites in it. Sometimes, you know, you might say I like to have my salad with bigger pieces in it. So I like to chop these things up nice and small. All right, and so I'll put my orange pepper in there as well. Then I have this beautiful red onion. So we're adding in lots of different colors. That's the fun thing about this recipe, getting a ton of different nutrition from all of the different colored items. So for my onion, I'm just going to slice it. And onion does have a strong flavor, so definitely go lighter. You know, if you haven't had raw onion in a salad before, go a little lighter on it at first. See if you like the flavor, give it a try. All right, so I'm just going to use some of those. And I'll put my onion in. You're going to see at the end, it's going to be like a beautiful rainbow in my salad bowl. And then I have a little bit of cucumber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the end off. And what I sometimes like to do is I like to cut around the sides. Sometimes the watery seed middle will dampen my salad a little bit. So sometimes I like to cut around that. So I'll save this for using for maybe a broth or what have you. And then I'm going to take my strips of cucumber, and just like my pepper, I'm going to cut them into long strips. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut in the opposite direction to do a nice dice. Any questions on the recipe while I'm just dicing this up? All right.
No,
Perfect.
yeah, none have come through, but I'm loving this salad dressing though, because I think like Green Goddess is something that we see in recipes or like in the grocery stores, and it's just like such a fresh dressing to make that we can all throw together. It's really popular, so to know how we can make it at home, I love that.
Yeah, and I feel like this specifically is one of those good catch-all recipes for herbs. Even the recipe itself says 1 cup of parsley, 1 cup of soft herbs, just whatever you have left around, hanging around. So very, very versatile of a recipe.
We did have
All right,
one question that came in, Aubrey, part of my interruption, about swapping for cucumber. So if someone doesn't like it or it doesn't quite sit well with them, is there something else aside from cucumber that a person could use?
Yeah, I mean, I would really say just whatever is your preference, whatever you enjoy to eat. You could always do cooked vegetables too. So like a sauteed zucchini or yellow squash if you wanted something. You could always put different like beans or lentils in your salad or other grains. I think it's really open to interpretation. So especially if cucumber maybe isn't your favorite or doesn't sit well with you, opting to go for your favorite, because I think it's a lot easier to get yourself to eat more veggies if that's one of your goals, if you're incorporating things that you like into it. So definitely pick your favorites, and they'll all taste delicious with this Green Goddess dressing. So good question. All right, I'm gonna grab some chickpeas. So let me get some tongs. I'm just gonna go over here. I'm gonna take, let's say, maybe another little scoop of chickpeas, put them on my salad. So the crunch in this Green Goddess salad comes from the chickpeas, the crunchy roasted chickpeas, and I just put on some pumpkin seeds as well. So I'll show you what our salad looks like pre putting our dressing on. It is a beautiful, I like to put everything in the little quadrants because I think it's so fun, and then you mix it together. You could put some avocado on top as well. When I went to the store, all of the avocados were rock solid, so I knew that none of them would be ready for today. So I don't have an avocado, but that would be delicious to slice it up and put it on top too for some healthy fats. But let me show you how to make the really great dressing that we're going to put in it. So I have here another blender cup. I have learned from previous cooking demos that I am going to wait. We need yogurt. I'm going to put it in at the top. When we put it in at the bottom, sometimes it gets a little stuck and you have to keep shaking it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, this is my catch-all plate of my extra fresh herbs that I've been keeping to the side. I'm going to start with my 1 cup of parsley. So I have here my parsley. I'm going to do the same that I did for the chimichurri and just rip off the top and put my parsley in it and try to stick that down in the bottom. And then I need a cup of soft, fresh herbs. So that really is up to your interpretation. You could do tarragon, basil, mint, oregano, whatever you have, cilantro, double parsley, whatever's available to you. Definitely utilize those. I'm putting in extra basil, extra mint that I have from my mint and basil cantaloupe cooler. And I also have a little bit of extra oregano. I bought one of the small packs, so I just have a couple little leaves left of that. And I'll just pop all those in. And so the oregano too, I'm trying to pull it off of the stem. The stems are a little thicker, but if you get some of the stems in, that's okay too. All right, so I've got all of my herbs now in here, just a beautiful cup of greens, looks like a salad in a cup. I'm going to grab from the fridge my Greek yogurt. So I just have plain non-fat Greek yogurt that I'm going to use. I have my cup measure from the polenta before. I'm going to give it a rinse. And then you need 1 cup of the Greek yogurt. So let me go ahead. I found that those smaller individual containers, it's about 2/3 of a cup. So 1.5 of those, and then you have a little yogurt snack when you're done making the salad dressing. I'm going to give it a little mix. You can use non-dairy yogurt as well if you're opting to go non-dairy. Definitely up to your interpretation. Also, if you don't love the taste or the tang of Greek yogurt, you could use a regular plain yogurt as well. Greek yogurt just has a little bit more protein, and it's also a little bit thicker when you're utilizing it. All right, so I'm making a little mess.
There's Aubrey. I'm sorry, we did have a couple questions while you're spooning out. If you,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So Susan asked just about going back to your pumpkin seeds. Did you dry heat them, dry toast them at all? Were they raw? She said she heard that makes them more flavorful to sort of dry toast them.
Yeah, so I have, let's see, I think they're just raw pumpkin seeds. Oh, I have them out still. Yep, just raw pumpkin seeds. I didn't toast them or anything like that, but whenever you have nuts or seeds, when you do toast them, it helps to get out some of those oils, and the flavors usually can become a little bit more potent. So I would certainly say, if you have pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds or, nuts that you wanted to top with, definitely toasting them is a good option to bring out some additional flavor. That's a really great point.
Wonderful. And Joyce had a question about adding more flavor to the chickpeas. She's asking if there's anything that we could soak the chickpeas in to give them more flavor. They were kind of bland. So any ideas?
That's a great question. I don't know about soaking them to absorb flavor. I mean, you could probably mix them with or have them with some maybe like vinegar and soaking them in a type of marinade that way. Like you would marinate any type of protein. They might absorb some of that, and then there will be the marinade stuck on it after when you cook it. I think that would be a good way to give them a little more flavor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, really whatever. Also, seasonings is your preference too. So, maybe if you're a little bit heavier with the paprika or the cumin, or you use a packet of taco seasoning, whatever flavor profile sounds good to you, and just kind of using the seasonings as liberally or as minimally as you see fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great ideas.
Yeah. All right, so I have my Greek yogurt in here, my herbs. I also have some scallions. So I need about a 1/4 cup. I'm just going to really loosely chop these bad boys up and put in the greens of the scallions. I'm a little looser with the measurements. I'm going to put in a clove of garlic. So cutting it, same process as before. I'm going to put in here, I have a tablespoon of olive oil, 2 teaspoons of honey, and 1 teaspoon of capers, which are a nice like briny addition to add a little salty flavor to it. All right, I'm pouring all that in. And then the last but not least, I'm gonna need some lime juice. So I need about 2 tablespoons. So I'll take my lime. I will take my trustworthy juicer. I'm sorry, lemon, take my trustworthy juicer. And I'm going to go ahead and juice this. Same thought as before. If you have a lime or you have an orange or what have you, you could use that instead. All right, perfect. And half of it got me the 2 tablespoons. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off, pour in my 2 tablespoons. And I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to blend. All right, I'll put the lid on. And this I want to be a little bit more on the liquidy side. I like to get everything nice and incorporated. So let's blend it up. All right, I'm gonna go ahead, give it a nice shake, get some of those herbs to the bottom. All right, and I'll give it one last mix. All right, now let's give this one last blend. All right, so here is our beautiful green goddess dressing. So bright and delicious. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the lid. This you could keep in a container with a tight fitting lid for about 3 to 5 days. It does have the Greek yogurt dairy in it, so just being mindful of that. If you used a non-dairy yogurt, it would potentially last a little bit longer, but there's still the fresh herbs in it. So just being mindful of that. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take it and I'm going to just do a nice drizzle, generous drizzle of my green goddess dressing on top. And so here is my beautiful green goddess crunch salad. You could top it with, again, nuts, other seeds, other vegetables, a little cheese, you know, whatever suits your fancy. This recipe is so up to interpretation. So hopefully you'll all enjoy that dressing in many different formats. Any questions on the dressing? Thank you. No dressing questions. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to get these last couple things out of my way. And then we're going to make the last recipe, which I promise you takes 2 minutes. So this is our mint and basil cantaloupe cooler mocktail. I'm just going to tidy up my workspace a little bit. With this, I'm going to get a new cutting board because I always forget that I cut onions and garlic on my cutting board, and then I'll use it for berries or what have you. And I'm like, these berries taste a little bit funky. So I'm just going to go ahead, start over, get a new cutting board that I have off to the side here. So I have my cantaloupe. Cantaloupes are becoming more in season, so they're going to be beautifully ripe. You could use whatever kind of melon you want. If you want to do honeydew or watermelon instead, you could certainly always do that. I need the big guns for this one. I've got my big blender. I'll move my blender out here. So I'm going to take the lid off. I have in here already half of a cantaloupe, and I need about 6 cups in total, which I have found is about 1 average sized cantaloupe. So what I do to cut it, I wanted to show you. I have my cantaloupe here. I'll cut it in half, scoop out the seeds in the middle, and then I cut the skin off of the sides so that I can chop it up into pieces. So what I'll do is I'll usually cut the top off so it's a nice flat surface to work with. And then I just go around the cantaloupe and I cut that skin off. Since this is a mocktail, I'm a little bit less picky about if there's any little green spots on it. Usually if I'm going to eat it, I will go back and cut off any little green marks that I have. But since we're just blending it up, no harm, no foul if there's a little bit of extra green spots on it, you know, that you missed while you're cutting it. Now I'm just going to take it and very loosely slice, just so that it fits in the blender mostly. Give it some slices. All right, and I'm going to take all of this, put it in my blender. I'm going to go ahead and give this just a quick pulse in the blender, just because it's quite full. All right. Perfect. Just wanted to make a little bit more room. So now we've got our semi-blended cantaloupe. What I'm going to do is I just need a couple quick things to go with it. I have 1 3/4 cup of water. I'll put that in. I have my mint and basil syrup. So you can actually see now the mint and basil have wilted a little bit. That means they were definitely releasing some flavor into there. So I'm going to take my strainer, pour it over, and you'll use all the syrup. All right, and I'll dump that out. And then I'm going to put in the juice of a grapefruit. Now, I do want to mention that grapefruit can interact with some medications. So always being mindful of that. If you're not able to consume grapefruit or you're unsure, talk to your doctor. And you can always use, just like any of these recipes, another citrus, and it's going to add just as much delicious brightness to the recipe. So don't fret if you can't have grapefruit. Using an orange or a tangerine or even a mix, some lemon and some lime, whatever works for you in the recipe. So I'm just squeezing it in. My citrus juicer is a little bit too small to handle a large grapefruit. So I'll squeeze that in. All right. I'm trying to get as much juice as I can. Perfect. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a nice, thorough blend. So I want it to be all mixed together. I want the cantaloupe to, as much as it can, be blended up. Perfect. So I'll show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like now. We've got a lot of mocktail. What you could do is, if at this point you said it's a hot day, I want something really nice and chilled, blend it with some ice and it'll be a nice slushy type mocktail. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain it and serve it over ice. So let me grab a little bit of ice from my freezer. I have a fun glass by my colleague Erin that I'm going to use for my mocktail. So I'll put in a couple pieces of ice just to make it nice and chilled. And then I'm just going to strain it over the ice just because there is a little bit of grittiness from the cantaloupe. Again, if you blended it with some ice, that really just goes away. So whatever your preference is for using it. I did have someone on the last cooking demo note, if you're straining it and you have all this pulp, you can always push out on the pulp and you can get some more liquid out of it. So that's something to keep in mind too. You can push on the pulp and get more liquid out of it. So let me give this a good mix. All right. And I'm just straining it over the ice. And then whenever I do have pulp, just for the essence of time, I'm just kind of tossing it to the side. All right.
Joyce had the suggestion of adding, if you wanted to add a little vanilla protein powder or something to it, or I'm thinking even, a vanilla sorbet or an ice cream for something a little more desserty like. There's a lot of things you can add to make that little creamy variation.
Oh yeah, I feel like that would be delicious, like a little float almost, have this and toss a little bit of, vanilla in it. Oh, so good. So good. All right, I'm just topping it. I have a little lime left over. So of course, making it fun. And that is it. That is our mint and basil cantaloupe cooler. So you can see it is, a more opaque consistency if that's all that cantaloupe in there, but it has such a beautiful bright flavor of the mint and the basil. I'll give it a try. Oh, really good. I actually have been having some bad luck with cantaloupes, and this one, I cut it open and the juice was coming out. I was like, this is going to be a great cantaloupe, and it is so good. It tastes so fresh like cantaloupe. So definitely give this a try next time. Maybe you bring it to your barbecue and bring it to the barbecue recipes. You have your fun mocktail. You have a delicious salad. And then you also have your shrimp and grits, your chimichurri shrimp and herb polenta. So those are all of the recipes I have for you today, everyone. I know that we have a couple different components. Hopefully you'll be able to try some of the various components in different ways. Susan said, what could you do with the leftover fruit pulp? You could always freeze them into little ice cubes to use for your mocktails, or freeze them into ice cubes that you could use for smoothies or what have you, especially if you don't squeeze all that juice out. So if you squeeze all the juice out, there's not going to be a lot left over, but if you have it a little bit more pulpy, then I would say save it in an ice cube tray. Use it for an ice cube in a drink, use it for fruit in a smoothie. Those would be great ways to utilize it. Great question. Any other questions or unanswered questions?
No, but I think some of us have our grocery store list ready. When do we come to eat? That's right, Susan. Right. When do we need to be there, Aubrey?
Yeah, everybody come on over now, while I tidy up, I'll make some plates and everybody can come over. I saw Joyce had an idea, blend some cottage cheese and make ice cream. Oh, okay.
I feel like this is a very trendy thing that I am seeing, Joyce, this blending of cottage cheese to make like an ice cream.
Yeah.
We have some very, people are staying on top of these trends. I love this.
I know. And I think there's just so many ways, to utilize leftovers. And we have a great series on our website from National Nutrition Month in March about, using leftovers, reducing waste. We were focusing on sustainability. So definitely check out our website for all of those tips and tricks as well. But thank you everybody for coming today. If you don't have any questions, you can, you'll get all the recipes afterwards. I will email those out shortly so that everybody can have them. But I appreciate you all joining me today, and definitely send me your pictures and let me know what you need as you're making the recipes. So enjoy.